All right, I've asked you to read about background images, and now it's time to practice with them. Don't really have a presentation exactly on them, because I think the best way to try them out is to use them. Some of you may use background images, or perhaps the gradients that come in the extra credit here, something like that, on your resume. And others of you won't. I think background images are a neat, fun thing. On the other hand, we have to make sure that they don't become distracting and make it hard to read the text. Or remember, our communication is a key thing. We really want people to be able to absorb the information you have and not be distracted with weird backgrounds and so on. And so this exercise is to gain familiarity with placing and positioning background images, and there's the due date. We have a normal kind of a project folder, and what is going to go in the folder? Again, the names for me are not that important, and honestly, they should not be capitalized, but that just happened here in this text here, remember? The key thing is that you're going to go get your color one again. Remember color one? Remember that bistro file? You're going to go get that file, and you're going to save it into your root folder twice. Call it background 1, background 2, or background and background 1, and your last name, whatever. That's fine. I'm also asking you to download from Moodle the bullseye.png, and you're going to be making a new PNG. This may be problematic. Some of you have Photoshop. I'll give you some Photoshop instructions, and you have them in the handout actually, this handout right here. How to use Photoshop to create this opacity-based PNG. I may do a quick lesson on Pixlr, which is an online photo editing tool if anybody doesn't have Photoshop. We are thinking that by this time, perhaps the virtual lab with Photoshop and other tools will be available to you. So one way or the other, I'm going to ask you to make this opacity-based PNG that we'll use in the second of these files here. And you could follow the instructions here if you want for this first couple of parts, and I will go over the extra credit later, or you can just play along with me and that will work just as well, which is what I would have done in the classroom. Some of these exercises would just play along with me. I'm going to be counting them as extra credit on things, and some will be graded separately. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look and open up. So make those 2 copies of your color one and open them both up in Notepad++. I have one here, which run it looks like this. If I got this right, and I do, and you'll recognize this file. It's the same old color one. Good. We'll reuse this to practice some background images. Now I've got all this other junk written here just to help me remember what I'm doing. And I have some other junk written up here. I don't even know what some of that is. It's been around, hanging around so long. You don't have that stuff, but don't worry about it. Okay? What you do have is a body declaration that looks something like this. Maybe not exactly the same, but don't worry if it doesn't. It probably has the same background color. That's good. We're going to be doing all this CSS background image stuff here in the body area. And the reason we do background images as CSS and not HTML, when we put an image in HTML, we're saying it's part of the content. It's an image we're showing you because it has that content kind of value. When we put an image in CSS, we're saying that it's part of the presentation, not part of the structure, but part of the presentation. It's there in the same way that a background color is, to add maybe flavor and presentation, but not necessarily the same kind of content. So we keep that distinction here with images also. So I ask you to download something called bullseye.png, and we're going to start with our basic background image command, which I'm not going to retype, but you are going to have to, and it's going to look like this. Background-image. That's the property that we're going to do, and the attribute is going to be a URL. And I think this is the first time I used a URL. One of the rare times we will use a parentheses, and we do these in CSS. That's the way to attach an image in CSS, is with the URL. But like href, like img, like in the link, style sheet link, all these things, they're still just a relative path. In this case, it's what goes inside the parentheses. And so in this case, if the image called bullseye.png is right there, then that's all that goes in there. If it was in a subfolder, we'd have to do a folder name / and all that stuff. And if this doesn't work for you, always what? if your image doesn't show up, there's really just two choices. Is your image where you thought it was? And this file you're editing, is it where you thought it was? Right? They have to be together in that root folder side by side. Sometimes people you get multiple copies of a file, and you actually think you're editing the HTML document, which is in the folder, but you're actually editing when it's not, and therefore that's why the image isn't showing up, and so on. So sometimes you have to close the file and make sure you go open the one you know you're supposed to have open. Also, is the image there too? And is the image name what you think it was? Did something happen on the download? Maybe it downloaded with a number 1 on it or something like that. Or maybe you mistyped it. All those things. But the image will show up if you get those things right. So let's see what happens. I'm going to save it and run it. And there we go. We've got this bullseye image, and it's going zoom all over the page, just like that. That is the default behavior of a background image. You place it once, okay, and it appears here in the super home position, and then it continues to tile across the entire page from that. And if we scroll the page, it goes with it. See, that is the default behavior. And what she uses here is a neat trick. She uses what I call an opacity-based PNG. So a PNG, remember, can have multiple levels of transparency. So it has complete transparency around here, and where we see the plain green coming through, and it has a white with nearly transparent everywhere else. That's a neat trick. And we'll try to make one of those later. And one thing I like about it is you can see it, but yet it doesn't really disturb the copy too much. You can still read pretty well through it and everything. And it works on a variety of colors too. So it works in here too. Okay. So what else can we do? Well, what if we didn't want it to go like this? Maybe we want it to not repeat. So we can tell it to not repeat. That's another command we can use. We can do background repeat. And say no repeat. And we'll run that. And there's just one of them. And this also shows us when we have just one where it appears. It appears in the super home position. And guess what? Instead of having no repeat, we could say background repeat, and we could say repeat X. Sometimes you just want to have maybe one background image and make it, and we can move them around. We'll see that later, and make it, maybe it's a bigger one. Or maybe we'll see also how you could have multiple background images too. In fact, there's an exercise you could do for extra credit with that. So maybe I won't show it to you. Okay, so repeat X, you can guess what this does, right? And guess what repeat Y does? Yes, of course. So I hope you're just playing along with me and trying this as you go. Repeat Y, repeat X, repeat Y. Very nice. Okay, let's just go back to having just the one of them. So I'm going to do no repeat. Okay, good. We want one semicolon. And let's tell it to center. There's another command we can use. We can do background position. Center. This is centered on the entire page. See? Centered on the entire page. So we can also move that centered thing around. We could do center and 100 px. Let's see how that changes it. We could put multiple things in there. So what if we put a space and put 100 px? You can read in your text about, you can do other things. You can do left, right, you can do multiple numbers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's something you can read on your text. 100 px, it's centered, but now it's 100 pixels from the top. And let's say we liked that position or some other position, whatever, put a different number in there, 200 or something like that. And yet we still wanted it to tile. Well, we could tell it, we could get rid of this no repeat. In fact, I could use the word repeat, which isn't necessary, but if I want to leave the command there, which is the same thing as the default is repeat. Now it's tiling, but see how the tiling is different? It's tiled based on what? Based on this initial one here. Okay? All right. So that's the first one. It tiles based on that. So if you want something to tile, but you want the tiling to work differently, like start in a different place, you can first position one of them, or get the idea, and then go ahead and let it tile. All right. So well, there's one more thing. There are lots of things more that you can do with background images, but as far as the basic commands, let's take this one. Let's try background attachment fixed. So what does this do? Remember the scrolling behavior? I'll just show you the scrolling behavior. Okay, so the background images scroll along with the text, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we could use background attachments fixed, which is if I save this, now if I run this, now the background stays still and the stuff rolls around on top of it. So that's a basic primer and background images. That is the end of the first part, that background image 1. You could save that file, and then you could close it up and now continue with background images 2. The thing about background images 2, so you could pause right here and do that. Save it, make sure you got it all set. It's still in that same root folder, and make sure your background images 2 open as we continue. But as we continue, we're actually going to use Photoshop. So I'm actually going to pause this also, my recording, so I can get Photoshop open. Okay, so here I am in Photoshop, and I'm going to assume you can use Photoshop also. I'll probably take just a quick minute and show you an alternative online photo editor, of which there's actually quite a few, free ones even, which you could do similar stuff. But Photoshop is still the major photo editing program, so we're going to assume we can use this. Okay, and what are we going to do? Well, we're going to make a file new. Yes, I'm getting notifications about classes that aren't happening anymore. Okay, and what do you want to call it? I'm going to call mine, I got too many of these, so I'm going to use the date. You could use whatever I suggest in the instructions. Did I tell you what to call it? I don't know if I tell you. This is we're making something similar to the bullseye thing. You could do just your name, or whatever. Doesn't matter. And document type, custom, yeah, sure. We're going to make it 400 by 400 pixels. A new document, 400 by 400 pixels. Remember, if these happen to be in inches, change them. Okay, pixels. Big difference between pixels and inches. And resolution, 72 is good. Color mode, that's fine. Background, contents is going to be transparent. And we won't worry about these things here. We'll just say OK. So 400 by 400. That was actually the size of that bullseye. It's nothing magic about that size. You could do most any size. Okay, so the key thing, the idea here before I start, I just want to tell you, we're going to make a letter, a piece of type, okay? And we're going to make it really big. And we're going to then give it we're going to make it white also. You could do a color if you want, as a similar effect. But remember, it has to then work with the background color too, and you want to have a clash there, but you want it to disappear either. So white or black, I think, are a little easier. And white's nice because it's easier to read through if you got dark type. But you're going to make it very transparent anyway, so it's going to barely show up. About 20% opacity. And then we're going to save it as a PNG, so it has multiple levels of transparency. And that's going to be it, I guess, right? Good, sure. Okay, so I'm grab the type tool over here, okay? And I'm going to wait till my computer wakes up. I'm actually typing in white right now. That's fine. I could change it later if you want, if it weren't in white. But white is what we're going to want. What font am I going to make? Well, I'm going to make something really big. Mine's already at 500. Wow, that's huge. Yours is not going to be that big. You're probably going to start at 72 or something. I mean, that's probably your default. And I don't know what your default font is. So you could make something straightforward or something weird looking. I have something called Algerian, which is quite weird. I'm going to maybe try a script. How about that? But you go through and find whatever font you want. Okay, I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to type. I'm not typing Lauren Ibsen. I'm going to type a capital letter or a capital piece of punctuation. And I think I'm going to do an and asterisk. Okay, good. Now, I know that's very hard to see, but I'm going to make it a lot bigger. Select it all, and I am going to make it about 500. I won't go to 500. Okay, I'll just put that number in here. Not 500. Let's make it 300. Okay. Let's move it. Where did it go? Wait. Let's try this over again. And I lost my letter. Okay. Let's try this again. Type it here, really large. I'm going to make a asterisk. The problem is that it's white. Use the tool and grab, and I've lost my thing again. Let me start this over again. Sorry for a little hiccup there. I found out what my problem was. The asterisk in this font was appearing way off the screen someplace. So when I typed a capital J, I ended up with the J, and both my asterisks are there still. And I'm going to get rid of. I don't like my asterisks idea anyway, so I'm just going to do a capital J. This is a weird looking capital J though in this font. Okay. Now I could continue to make this bigger. My goal is going to be to make it roughly the full size here of this. So I could go in and make it bigger, but I might as well just do at this stage, by the way, at this stage, I'd like to have my layers available too. Oh, I see them right there. Good. Okay. I'm going to do a free transform to turn it into an image, and then I'm going to stretch it. Edit, free transform. Now I can just use these tools and stretch. To try to fill it all up. Make it bigger, stretching. And roughly, it doesn't have to be perfectly filled. So I'm just going to move it a little bit so it's not touching the edges too much, like that. Okay. So I did I made a single letter or piece of punctuation or something, and I chose an interesting font. Choose what you want, whatever letter you want. And I kind of made it big at the beginning, and then used tree transform, and I stretched it till it filled or almost filled the box. And then in the layers panel, I'm going to reduce this. I'll make sure I'm on this layer, the type layer, and I am. And I'm going to reduce the opacity to about 20%. Ooh, not 5, I'm like 20, and here I am down here. 21 is fine. And on my screen, for you, I don't know, for me, I can barely see it. Is it there? Yes, it is. It's still there. And I'm going to save this. I'm going to do save as and apply the transformation. Yes, I will apply transformation. And I'm going to not make a PSD. I'm going to do a PNG as the choice. And I'm going to put it in my folder. And that is not my folder. Where the heck am I? I'm in my drive, in my 317, in my background. And I got too many other files there already, but this one's called 2020. I have to remember that. And I'm going to save it. And yeah, that's okay. All right, good. I can leave this here or whatever. Now you can go through the same spiel. You're starting fresh with your color, your background too, right? And you could make it repeat or not, doesn't matter. You could do centered, fixed, but the key idea is what goes in here. And I'm going to make this one 2020. So really, there's not much HTML or CSS at all we're doing here. We're just you just learned how to make one of these images in Photoshop. And if you know some other version, there's my new image there, right? So that's how you make one of those images. And of course, you can try different colors if you want instead of white, and so on. All right, so that's the end of that exercise. And you can just save this, close it up. So now you should have 2 images and 2 HTML documents in your root folder. And you can go ahead and zip that up and stick it on Moodle, and you will fulfill the exercise. Now, what about the extra credit? And I want to show you something else then afterwards too. Let's take a look at the extra credit, which is here. Okay, first of all, we did that. Extra credit 1. Go into your textbook and see exercises 13, 3, 4, and 7. And they use 3 HTML files and copies. There's three more copies of your color 1. 3 more copies of your color 1, and they're sitting there in the resource folder for you. These are interesting images that show you more ways to use background images. Interesting exercises that show you more ways to use background images. And there's a background extra credit folder. And you know what? If you get them all done, all 3 of those, and you do a pretty good job, I will certainly replace a lower missing grade. And depending on how good a job you do, I may even replace 2 lower missing grades. By the way, if you ever don't have lower missing grades to replace, I add up to 20 points on some other assignment. So that's significant extra credit. So just have to read the exercises and just do them. I won't tell you anything more about that. Okay, now about this number 2. Again, full extra credit as above. Make a new root folder and copy 2 more versions of color 1 into it. Now let's call them 6 and 7. Have you done 3, 4, and 5? And we already did 1 and 2. Good. Now we're going to use the CSS gradient pattern gallery. Use a pattern, apply it in number 6, and make your own using online color gradient generator. Okay, an online color gradient generator. So where are these and what is this? What does this mean? What is this about? Well, hold on just a second, I'll show you. So for the second extra credit, you could play with some of these tools that I have listed here on the Moodle site. If you want to, you can go search for your own too. This would be free online color gradient generators or gradient pattern galleries. I suggest you do. I suggest if you do 2 versions of this for this second part of the extra credit, right? So in one version, new version of color 1, you're going to use a gradient pattern gallery. Here's one here, and actually this samples is actually a pattern gallery also down here. So I'll use this one. So what happens? This is just a pattern of a gallery of a whole bunch of patterns that somebody made. So if I like this one, actually the lined paper might be neat. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that's what happens when you leave your phone on during a recording. Okay, I think lined paper might actually work well, but most of these will not. But I'm going to use one that probably won't work well just because it's weird, but I just want you to see it. How about this wave? Okay, I'm going to do that, but oh, I like this rainbow. You grab whichever one you want. And when you click on it, you're going to get this huge amount of code. What this is actually the color instructions for making a complicated gradient pattern. And you're going to copy this whole thing, like literally just copy it. Okay? And you see it's a background command with a colon and then with a semicolon, and actually lots of them. It's a big bunch of text. So I'm going to go paste that in. Where am I going to paste it? I'm back here in my color 1. I'm in the same copy. You'll be on a new copy. So ignore that fact. All right. Of course, we're not going to have a background attachment or position or repeat or image anymore. In fact, we're not even going to have a background color anymore. We're going to start right here without any background stuff at all and paste this whole thing in here. And it's a big bunch of stuff. You can actually go in here and play with these numbers and see what happens. It will be changing colors. You can see all these are all color codes and position codes too. And then other things that draw shapes too. It's all code, though, that creates this image. Let me run it. There, I got all my bubbles and stuff. Isn't that pretty? Really hard to read, but pretty. Okay, good. That's using one of those pre-prepared patterns. Then I want you to go, not there, back here, and pick one of these other ones, like this generator or this generator here. I'm going to use this one. And what this does is it allows you to set the 2 ends of a color gradient and then change opacity, for instance, also. It makes it a little simpler thing, but you kind of have more control over it. You're making it sort of yourself in a way. I'm going to click on this little guy here. Oops, click on him. Come on. Okay, no, I'm sorry, I should have done this. When I click on him, that's right, the color shows up down here. I click on the color, and no, I don't want to start with a blue. I want to start with a yellow. Okay, I'll say okay. And I don't want it to go to a blue. I want it to go to you pick your colors. A green, maybe. That's a little odd, yellow and green. It's going to go through a blue in the middle, so it's a 3-part gradient. And I'm going to make it's going to go transparent. I click on this transparency button here, and change the transparency down to like, I don't know, 50% or so. And then, oh, I might as well do the same thing on this one to make it easier to read. Actually, it's going to go, it's already there. Transparency there. Opacity, not transparency, opacity. Same idea in reverse. About 50%, something like that. I could do more things too. I could change it from vertical to diagonal. Maybe I'll do that, sure. And each time I make these changes, this text in here changes also. I'm going to copy the whole thing when I'm done, and I'm going to go stick it in here, and I'm going to, of course, paste it right over this big bunch of junk here. Get rid of that first and paste it in here. This would be the second of these files. Of course, you'd be in a new file, not just replacing the old one, or just save it over it. You'll see there's a lot of comments in here. There's fallbacks, there's for different browsers and so on, different choices. And so these gradients are a little new and some older browsers can't handle them. I'm going to run this. And it's a nice, pretty gradient. That I can almost see doing, especially if you keep it nice and opaque like that. But you can't do much else for colors then. And I'm not sure if it really sends the message you want for your resume. Anyway, we'll keep that as an option. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to say is, what if you didn't, so that's the extra credit. Maybe not the last thing. What if you didn't want, okay, so that's all the assignment. So you can stop there, and the extra credits. You can do the extra credits too. This is not something for you to do, just something to look at. What if you don't want to have this kind of a logo-like pattern? What if you want to actually put an image in there? Okay, if I can use an actual image, and where's my example? Here it is. I want to use this one. I'm going to do a background image, and it's actually a JPEG, and no repeat until it's center top. Now this is not a great bunch of text to do this with, but I just wanted to show it to you in general, because it can be a regular image. So now imagine if I didn't have this text here in this way, which is hard to read now, but I could make a giant image as a background. And you can even have some opacity on it too. And then it becomes not an image that I'm showing you, because it is something that's become an image which is more mood. And if I have the right image and position it properly, I can have text in or around it and have it still be readable. Maybe this isn't a good example, but the idea that it doesn't have to be just those kind of little pattern kind of images. It could be an actual big image. And finally, I want to show you Pixlr. If you go to pixlr.com, and you don't have to pay anything for this, and just click on Pixlr. I already started to make some things here, but you would have to start new. That's why I'm showing some things here. You can make an account. You can actually give them money if you want, but you don't have to. If you don't have Photoshop, you can make the same exercise with this kind of tool. It's just not as easy. It's a free online image editing tool. It's a fun one to get used to. They've just changed their whole interface, so I'm really not that good with it. I only just started playing with it a few minutes ago. So there's a little learning curve. You would create new, and again, you can still make it 400 by 400. If you're going to do you don't have Photoshop, why not use this instead? And you can give it a name, like Pixlr 2020, your name or any name you want, doesn't matter. And background, no, we don't want a background. That would be like a color background. No, we do not want it. I'm just going to say create, and it makes a little thing like this. And I'm just going to say, I'm actually going to tell this background layer to have a transparency of 0. I don't want anything there. It's funny. It seems like it should be 100% for transparency. It's actually like opacity, but that'll work. Don't worry, that'll work, I think. And then I'm going to grab some text. So I'm going to grab the text tool, and I'm going to click and I'm going to say add new text, and I have to click on this. And then if I double click in here, I can add a big something. I'm going to use an ampersand in this case. Okay, good. And I can make this really big by increasing the size. I have a size button down here. Come on, move. That's making it big. I can reposition it. Okay, and my goal would be, I can open up that box a little bit too, to make an ampersand that roughly filled the whole thing, right? It's be too big. You get the idea. You can play with it. So I'm going to say I roughly filled it. And then I'm going to go to that layer with the letter on it and click on this layer settings, and I can take the transparency down to, and it shouldn't say a transparency, it should say opacity, I think. 20%, let's say. So I really have done the same kind of thing, okay? And then I would be done. I would want to do Control S, which is the same thing as save down here, which brings up this window. I would save it as a PNG. It may not default to that. I don't know why it might or might not. I think it tries to guess what you want. The name for me would be OK, and sizing is OK, and I would click download. Now, see, it doesn't give you a choice to save it someplace, but it downloaded it in your default download location. I'm going to show it in the folder. I'm going to go grab it. I'm going to go put it in my background images, which I have way more things than you would ever have here. And I'm going to go try it out. Pixlr PXLR 2020. I forget the name of these things. And now I'm not going to use this stuff here. No. I'm just going to do this background image. PXLR-2020. Shoot. White on white is not going to work very well. The problem is I did not have I lost my color, but there it is. Should have done a Control Z first. All right. First, I also need the color in there for this one. Okay, and there it is. Opacity-based PNG using an online free program. Wow, that's enough for one recording.